Hello, everyone. I'm Bill Raggio. I'm a senior fellow at Foundation for Defense of Democracies and editor of FDD's Long War Journal. This is Generation Jihad, the podcast that covers all things in what used to be known as the global war on terror, but we now call the Long War. Today, Will isn't going to be with us, but today my friends and colleagues at FDD will join us. Joe Trusman. Joe is editor of FDD's Long War Journal, a senior research analyst, and my Monday co-host. Joe covers Palestinian terror groups and Hezbollah and much, much more. David Daoud, senior fellow at Foundation for Defense of Democracies. David focuses on Hezbollah, Israel, Lebanon issues, and very familiar with the entire scene. Gentlemen, welcome to today's episode.
Thank you, Bill.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, we got a lot of talk, a lot to discuss today, but we're only going to talk about one subject because there's only one subject to talk about today. And I got to just warn the audience, a trigger warning. So and that is an intentional joke here. If middle school boy humor isn't your thing, you probably shouldn't listen to today's episode. And speaking of triggers, that's what we're going to talk about today's. It's the only news story that matters. I'm going to call it the Hezbollah pager event. Unless you've been living in a cave. Yesterday, Israel conducted an attack that literally, in some cases, neutered thousands of Hezbollah fighters. They detonated pagers that were planted. This is an amazing story. I love it. New York Times headline is exploding pagers target Hezbollah, kill 11 and wound thousands. Presumably, Israeli intelligence, presumably Mossad, remotely detonated thousands of pagers that were tampered with before they reached Hezbollah and distributed to key Hezbollah commanders and fighters throughout Lebanon. I guess we could call it now. We got a new one. You know, we've had things like in the past donkey IEDs used by jihadists and suicide vest IEDs, but now we got the pager IED to add to this. You can add a different P word now too with the impact at Hezbollah. It's just a brilliant operation. David, I'm going to start with you. How did this happen? Give us the details on what happened.
Yeah. Some smart-ass Israelis are dubbing this operation below the belt, and it was picked up by Lebanese media.
Yeah.
Assuming this was the official Israeli name for the operation, but it wasn't. As far as we can tell, look, I'm no explosives expert. I'm not going to pretend to be, unlike some people on Twitter who keep switching their expertise hat. But as far as we can tell, the initial reports had indicated that perhaps the Israelis had figured out how to send a signal to these pagers to make the lithium-ion batteries explode. But then I'm seeing other stuff where people are saying there's no way that a lithium-ion battery can cause this kind of explosion. So other reports have indicated that the Israelis had interdicted a shipment of these pagers that Hezbollah had purchased from Thailand, if I'm not mistaken, and perhaps implanted some size of explosives within the pagers, and then decided to detonate them all simultaneously yesterday by sending a signal. This comes on the heels of Shin Bet, Israel's internal security agency, revealing that Hezbollah had planned its own cross-border detonation attack targeting what remains an unnamed former Israeli defense official. They'd smuggled an explosive somehow into Israel. We know Hezbollah has networks operating within Israel, and they were planning to detonate this thing remotely from Lebanon. Also last year, this comes 1 year after Hezbollah had planned a similar attack in Hayalkon Park in Tel Aviv, where they were planning on assassinating former IDF chief of staff and former defense minister Moshe Ya'alon, better known as Bogi Ya'alon. According to Al Arabiya, the intended target of yesterday's attack on the Israeli side would have been former IDF chief of staff Aviv Kochavi. So it seems like the Israeli message was, whatever you can try to do, we're going to do better. We're going to hit you really hard where it hurt.
Really hard.
Really hard.
Not hard anymore. I'm going to tell you that. Definitely below the belt. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, if they didn't name this operation below the belt, given the creativity of this operation, yeah, David, I saw in the I think it was New York Times or elsewhere where they said that there's been reports of like 1 to 2 ounces of explosives were planted. If that's the case, if it wasn't just detonating the batteries, and I am not a explosive expert, and I don't play one on TV either, or Twitter or X or whatever we're supposed to call it now.
Can we name names about people who do? Or
yeah, sure. Go ahead. Name some names. Yeah, why
Charles
not?
Lister.
This is a fun episode, David. Let's just make it fun. Go for it.
Yeah, Charles Lister is the expert on expertise. I don't
know. Yeah, right. Look, I found in this business, right? Like, stay in your lane. I'm sure there's explosive experts and communications experts out there, and lithium battery experts that know far more than we do. What we do know is the pagers exploded, and some guys, are lesser men today for it.
Lesser men than they already were.
Sure are. And that we do know. No matter how it was done, this is a crafty operation. I think this might go down in history as one of the most, just given the scale of it, one of the most audacious operations. If they did have to interdict those pagers and plant explosives in them, boy, someone made a lot of money somewhere, right? Someone in Thailand or somewhere in that shipment. If that's true, you should really get running right now, because Hezbollah is probably looking for you, if they could ever recover, that is. And I'm just stunned by the scope and scale of this operation and the impact. Again, 11 dead, hundreds wounded, or thousands. They said 28,000. So, and I believe they said somewhere the shipment was around 3,000 or so pagers.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And another 9 dead today as well, and 300 wounded. And think about the fact that the pagers were supposed to be. There's a Reuters report that everyone is saying, it didn't age well, clearly, from I think July, that this was Hezbollah's failsafe. We go back a few months ago, and Nasrallah was telling his followers, Hezbollah's direct members, but also the group's followers, hey, be careful. Your cell phone is a spying device. CCTV is anything with a Wi-Fi connection the Israelis can hack into. And they were thinking of spying. I don't think they'd imagine that the Israelis could do something like this, where they could detonate Hezbollah's communications devices, the cell phones they were using. So the beepers were a precautionary measure that Hezbollah had taken to prevent Israel from hacking into their communications network. And the Israelis found a backdoor way to hack in. It wasn't exactly figuring out what they were saying, but the fact that they were able to pull this off on the precautionary measure. And then yesterday, we obviously have Hezbollah sending out messages, dump your beepers if they haven't blown up yet. And today we have these two-way radios blowing up.
Beautiful. Just beautiful.
And I was watching a report even on, I think it was LBCI or Al Jadid, where it was saying that a lot of these two-way radios that had exploded were purchased, some of them 3 years ago. So this has been a long-standing Israeli operation, went under the radar for so long. I mean, there were reports, I think in Al Monitor yesterday that, again, these reports come in, take them with a grain of salt, right, that the Israelis had to act yesterday prematurely because the operation risked being discovered by Hezbollah. And so they had to either go now or lose what they'd done. But if they had maintained this for 3 years, say with the walkie-talkies, that's considerable. That's considerable, and it shows again the penetration of Hezbollah's organizational apparatus by Israeli intelligence, and the fact that maybe Hezbollah's counterintelligence isn't as great as they make it out to be.
Yeah, and Hezbollah is going to have a lot of penetration issues or lack thereof going forward as well. Just keep that in mind. So Joe, they use it or lose it. Which, by the way, Hezbollah can no longer. They lost it. Some of these guys can no longer use it, and So I warned you guys about this. I did warn you. These jokes write themselves.
South Park edition of Generation Jihad. Yeah.
Look, if we can't laugh at them today, then we can't ever laugh at them. But this is called just desserts. But Joe, you, David, Benham, and myself and our producer Danielle, we were texting about this yesterday. What was your, a lot of talk of the use it or lose it, so to speak. How would Israel gain by not detonating these pagers? Do we think that Israel's monitoring locations and communications for Hezbollah operatives for some time?
Oh, absolutely, for sure, right? I mean, especially during this war. I think on one or two occasions, Hezbollah said, published a statement saying, warning people, especially in the south, hey, turn off your in southern Lebanon, hey, turn off your CCTV your cameras, right? That are, that are in your homes and outside your homes. Israelis may be hacking them and finding our operatives. So it's possible these pagers and now today walkie-talkies and maybe some other devices too. I've seen all sorts of reports, solar panels, phones, and some other devices that have exploded. But maybe these devices have been used, right, by Israel to track Hezbollah operatives, specifically those that are out in the field, right, that are in southern Lebanon that have been firing at Israel, and maybe some of the Radwan commanders that have been eliminated too. So I think it seemed odd when this all happened, right? It was a surprise, right?
Yeah, we were at the beginning. We're like, did this really happen?
Right?
Is this real news? Right? And then we were wondering, well, why would they do this when they did it? That's why I ascribe a lot to the use it or lose it theory. I've seen this in the jihadist world where all of a sudden we see a spate of suicide attacks in an area, or it usually occurs right after a cell, like a key leaders of a cell were captured, or something dismantled, intel captured. So I get, but again, as David said, take it all with a grain of salt. But sorry, go ahead, Joe.
No, you're absolutely right. But it's it was just kind of weird. Like, okay, there's this, because you saw the aftermath. What happened? Everyone was confused, right? Potentially thousands of Hezbollah operatives were injured here. It was the perfect time for Israel to strike strategic sites, Hezbollah sites, right? But they didn't. It makes sense to me that maybe this was a part of something bigger, right? Like a first strike option type thing, right? Start confuse the enemy, then hit them. I think it probably was, but then as some reports have suggested already, that the Hezbollah may have found out about it, or maybe some operatives found out about it. They were suspicious of the pagers. So that Israel decided, hey, let's do it now, right? So I think this thing was a part of something bigger, right? But Israel decided to do it now, and then today with walkie-talkies and apparently some other devices as well. So tonight rather, when Hassan Nasrallah goes to bed and his commanders, they're going to think, what's going to happen tomorrow, right? I mean, it's perfect for the Israelis.
Nasrallah, look out. Don't use your microwave.
Right.
I hope they got to his glasses. That would be fantastic, wouldn't it? Like, if they could, like, mini glasses IED.
He's using those Wayfarers, the Meta Wayfarers.
Yeah.
Exactly. I love the creativity here, and boy, they could do it. Like, does Hassan Nasrallah use an electric toothbrush? Maybe we need to target that.
You also have to think about, to the point of the intelligence penetration, right? Like, this is the third major coup, if you think the intelligence coup the Israelis have scored against Hezbollah in the course of these past 11 months. Mm-hmm. One is a continuing impressive intelligence accomplishment, which is the assassination of these law enforcement commanders on the fly, right? These guys thrive in anonymity. They made, their place in the Hezbollah's military hierarchy is kept secret, and the Israelis are able to find them roaming around South Lebanon on a motorbike, in a car, and picking them off in real time. They're not only able to identify them, but their precise location in real time. And then let's not forget Fuad Shukr, who was killed on July 30th. Again, there's a reason I keep emphasizing this. There's a reason why Hezbollah's top military commanders keep earning the moniker of the Ghost. These guys, again, thrive in anonymity. Think of Mustafa Badruddin. Think of Imad Moghniya. We didn't know what these guys looked like until after they were assassinated. They'd undergone plastic surgery, reportedly in some cases, right, to alter their physical appearance. Sometimes, that you have a picture that's 20 years old of them. And the Israelis were able to find this guy, to lure him, according to reports, to his demise with a cell phone call that was placed minutes before his death, and to eliminate him. So, and then you have this, right? Then you have something like this, which is massive in terms of scale. And for those who didn't die, even for those who didn't survive or suffer critical injuries, how many of them are going to be put out of combat, either temporarily or permanently? You think of a place where you put a beeper. right? Do you have permanent injuries to your pelvic muscles or your pelvic bones? Do you have permanent injuries to your do you have a leg permanently broken? I don't know. Chunks of muscle removed? Are you able to return to combat? And that's
were you holding the pager when it went
exactly,
off?
Exactly. Did you get blinded? Right. So a lot of these guys are not. A lot of these people will not be able to return
David,
to combat.
speaking of plastic surgery, I think there's going to be a lot of plastic surgeons needed in Lebanon at this point in time. Some of that's just not recoverable. Sorry to say for those guys. Well, maybe not sorry. Yeah. And David, you mentioned an important point, tracking those Rod 1 commanders. Where are these pagers being used?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
See, that's, part of my, part of the reason why I think I ascribe to that use it or lose it theory is if that's the case, and we don't know the answer to these, we're only guessing, or, using logic. But if that was the case, that information in the long run, tracking key commanders and hitting them when needed is far more valuable. The only case I would have made, which Joe alluded to, right, actually stated, right, in the presage to major combat operations against Hezbollah. That was the perfect time to strike. And that's, again, why I subscribe to the use it or lose it theory on this, because that was the time. You have a significant percentage. I would have thought, I think I texted this to you guys yesterday, I would have thought Hezbollah would have started dismantling all of its electronics equipment and putting it aside. And then, David and Joe, as you guys noted, you got radios blowing up and other pieces of electronics blowing up today. Maybe the message hasn't gotten across.
I think they thought this was, again, I think they were looking for one thing, which is monitoring. They didn't expect explosions. Right.
Yeah.
And I think they thought this was too low tech for the Israelis to be able to get into. And the Israelis found a way around that, right, by interdicting the shipments. And it seems like, most plausibly, putting some amount of explosives in each of these devices. So I don't think Hezbollah was ever expecting this. That if you go low tech, the Israelis are going to match you on the low tech in their own way. And not enough is being made of the precise nature of this attack, this Israeli operation, right? Speaking some videos. Right. There's the guy standing at the supermarket, right? That video that, two guys standing at the supermarket, right? The guy looking for produce and people around him, his pager explodes and everyone around, not even a single tomato was harmed in the making of this movie. But some eggs were.
Was he in the nuts aisle?
But something, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. And not a single person around him was harmed. Same thing with the guy in the checkout counter, right? The cashier was not even harmed. She seemed a little startled. Now there's the child who was killed in this attack. I've still not been able to pinpoint this child's identity. I've seen conflicting reports on who this child was, their age, even their gender. Today, I think it was either LDCI or Al Jadid had reported that this child. They were referring to the child as a male and as a member of Hezbollah scouts, these scouts. So was this, and we know that Hezbollah is not above using children for different combat roles. I mean, you look at the last years of the Syrian civil war, or really the major combat operations in the Syrian civil war. You start to see a bunch of 16 and 17-year-olds dying in Hezbollah's ranks. And these are being drawn right out of the scouts into the tabia, right into the into the fighting ranks. So could they have been using children as messengers? I don't know. It's a tragedy whenever a child is harmed. This falls on the organization, irrespective of what this child was doing. It falls on the organization to not manipulate a child and put them in harm's way. But here they were. It seems like perhaps this child was involved in maybe carrying messages or something. And they were harmed. They were harmed when these beepers exploded.
Joe, you had a point.
Yeah, well, something an observation that I had, and I guess I shouldn't be surprised about this at all. But yesterday, and I'm sure we're going to see it again today too. You have these people coming out saying, "Oh, look what Israel did! They attacked, people." Right? They don't say Hezbollah, so right. they frame it as civilians. Right? These are just a bunch of talking heads on Twitter and everything else. But yeah, they're trying to frame this like Israel attacked a bunch of Lebanese civilians, right? And we know that's not the case, right? This targeted Hezbollah.
It couldn't be more targeted. It couldn't
right.
be more
You can't exactly. What else are you going to do, right? I mean,
this is as targeted as you get.
Yeah.
Exactly. It just doesn't. So it shows to me that it doesn't matter what the Israelis do as far as how they target, right? If it's the most precise targeting that they can that's ever been conducted in the history of warfare, or if they use 1,000-pound JDAM or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's never good enough, right? And it's for some in the international community, and it's just ridiculous, right? It really is. So, listen, these guys, Israel was targeting Hezbollah. That's it, either with the pagers or the radios or other communication device. Not the civilians, not civilians in Lebanon. So, and that's a fact. And then, listen, Hezbollah would not have been in this situation if they didn't handcuff themselves to Hamas in Gaza, right? That if they didn't start this war, this conflict on October 8th. So, this is all on Hezbollah, right? All of it. And of course, there are those people out there that are saying, "Oh, look what Israel is doing," right? So it's just an observation. It's quite ridiculous, but people are buying into it, unfortunately.
Yeah, and look, these same people, let's just face it, they're useful idiots. These are the same people that had absolutely nothing to say on October 7th, 2023, when Hamas.
Well, they had some things to say.
Yeah, well, that's true. You're right about that, David. Yeah. They had nothing critical to say, shall I say, of Hamas and this Palestinian Islamic Jihad and others, just rampaging through civilian settlements, killing women and children and the elderly. That was perfectly fine. But if someone's killed as the result of an attack that clearly targeted Hezbollah, the Israelis are the worst people on the planet. So,
by the way, as we're speaking, it seems like I'm seeing reports in Israeli media that the explosions may have resumed in Lebanon.
And any indication of what might be blowing up this time?
Let's see.
I mean, look, clearly the Israelis are setting it all off now. Whatever they've planted in any devices, they're going. And again, I hate to keep beating it, but this is, again, what really leads me to believe this is, they ain't beating it anymore, folks. Some of these guys.
At least you still can, Bill.
Well, yeah, this just describes more to the use it or lose it. The Israelis now know they have to. Now, if they're following this up with a major attack against Hezbollah infrastructure, both militarily and political, then yeah, I understand. But to me, those jets should have been going on, and rockets and missiles should be from Israel should be targeting Hezbollah immediately after this attack. That would have been the perfect timing. But I guess there's still time. There's still confusion. I just don't see that happen. I feel like the Israelis are still too constrained by the United States.
Well, that's the problem. And you see also, I don't know if you saw, Germany just now, as we're talking, has halted weapons shipments to Israel. There's a UN General Assembly resolution about revoking essentially Israel's right to self-defense in the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. So you have growing international pressure on Israel. You have the United States disinterested in widening the ambit of this conflict into Lebanon. Whatever Hezbollah has done so far, right? The metric by which the United States has judged its willingness to support Israeli warfare efforts, if we even go back either diplomatically or militarily, if we even go back to the 6-Day Wars, the idea that there's sufficient prior provocation by an adversary. This is why the Israelis took the first blow in 1973 during the Yom Kippur War. And whatever Hezbollah has done so far, thousands of rockets, daily attacks, these diplomatic solutions offering no real solution to the threat that Hezbollah would pose to the residents of northern Israel, none of this is being deemed a sufficient provocation. So it's unclear what would satisfy this idea of sufficient provocation. And perhaps the Israelis are trying to trip Hezbollah up into overreacting in some way and turning to the West and saying, what do you want from us? What do you want from us?
Yeah, and David, to be fair to you, I was very skeptical of this idea yesterday when you mentioned it, and I've kind of come around after thinking about that. So it's a really good point. Putting it in that light, I remember yesterday I was saying, just why don't the Israelis got to go it alone? It's time. They're wasting. These constraints are real. The loss of weapons systems and ammunition. That's something the Israelis have to contend with that we here in America just aren't used to.
We never have to. I mean, I keep making this point that the way Israel and the United States can make war, it's a difference in kind. Who's going to cut off university relations with our research and exchanges and with the United States? Who's going to boycott the U.S. economy? Right? Who's going to cut off weapons? We produce our own weapons. We have a near infinite supply of funds. We have a much larger population. Who's going to cut us off? What's the ICC and the ICJ going to do to us? And what can the Security Council even do to us? In the sense that, if Security Council resolution passes and Israel violates it, Israel could be open to sanctions. And the United States is simply not amenable to that pressure. We have a veto. And if for whatever reason, I don't know, we misclass that day and we don't exercise our veto on that Security Council resolution and it passes against us, who's actually going to sanction the United States? They would do more harm to themselves than to us. We are virtually immune to any international pressure. Domestic pressure, yes, as a democracy, but Israel has to fight both against domestic pressures and international pressures. As a much smaller country, as a country that doesn't have domestic weapons capability, production capability, as a country that requires that whose technological edge depends on Technion having a durable research relationship, an exchange relationship with MIT, for example, which depends on companies willing to buy Israeli startups. Which depends on military and civilian cooperation in different fields between Israel and other countries, and that can all be easily cut off. So the Israelis have to, count to 1,000 before they take any move. So the fact that they took this move, I think, signifies that they think the threat is big enough, and they need Hezbollah to fire the first shot. We'll see if they do.
Well, I think. Sorry, Bill. Don't mean to interrupt you. I think it's important to think, okay, so what's the next step, right? What's going to happen? I mean, these two explosions, right? There are 2 days of these attacks now. Hezbollah is obviously going to respond, right? How are they going to respond? Are we going to see something like the Fuad Shukr response, right? Where they sent some drones and it was nothing, right? To be honest with you. Or are we going to see something bigger, right? And which I anticipate. And on top of that, we got to remember this, the Iranian ambassador to Lebanon was hurt here, right? Was injured. So the Iranians may feel that they have to respond, right? And of course, we still have I haven't forgotten about the Khania thing, right? So,
that was another major.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, the Israeli intelligence Mossad is on a roll when it comes to this stuff.
Yes.
Significant up Fuad Shakur, the Radwan targeting, Hania. Now this, yeah, absolutely. And on the point of the Iranian ambassador, what is he doing with a Hezbollah pager?
So it seems like it was his bodyguard who had the pager, and as far as I can tell, the injury was to the Iranian ambassador's eyes. So the question to be asked there is, why are your eyes near this dude's pager? A question in the spirit of this show.
Yeah. I mean, there's several answers to that one. Just wondering.
We're just asking questions.
Was the pager in the pocket, or were they looking at it
together?
May have dropped it.
So let me help you get your pager.
Or maybe something else was going on while the pager was in his pocket. I don't know. It's certainly these are the questions that deserve answers.
Yeah. This is the critical question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a little too close to that pager, one way or another. But I mean, in all seriousness, Iran's ambassador,
has
access to a Hezbollah pager. I mean, Does that not tell us everything we need to know? About how Iran is. This is what drives me crazy, and reporting on this for almost 2 decades now. It's just so obvious the role that Iran plays when it comes to its proxies. Not that it's just, well, it gives them weapons and money and they just go and do their own thing. They're intimately involved, maybe a little too intimately involved in this case, with with Hezbollah's operations, with Hamas's operations, with the Houthi operations. And the fact that it's likely, all joking aside, it's likely that the page goes off because it was reported that it was supposed to be a message from a senior leader. So it's likely that the bodyguard pulls the page. Oh, look, a message from Hezbollah's senior leaders. They're probably both looking at it. Anyway, that's probably the official story. I like to think it's the other way around. But, and I'm going to stick with it. It was the other way around. I think he was going down on his bodyguard. So let's just go with that. That's what was happening. And
for us.
We heard it here first, the Generation Jihad, folks. So, no, but in all seriousness, that's what it just tells you everything we need to know about the collusion between Iran and its proxies.
Collusion, I think, is even putting it too lightly, right? Do I collude with my hand, or is my hand an extension of me?
Yeah, right. Well said.
And this is the question here. And I think, to Joe's point, what is Hezbollah going to do now? This really pushes them into a tight spot, right? From the outset of this war, they've been trying to play this balancing act between, not sending Lebanon to hell in a handbasket for all intents and purposes. You're dealing with a country that, economic collapse, no real recovery. 100% of its currency has lost almost 100% of its value. You've had brain drain. You had people leaving. You have power blackouts that are happening more routinely, but total power blackouts, political stagnation, and more critically, you don't have countries willing to provide economic aid to Lebanon, certainly not economic recovery aid after a war. So if Hezbollah brings war upon this country, it's going to be saddled with taking a drubbing from the Israelis, which they know they will take a drubbing, forget their bellicose rhetoric, and the massive destruction that is going to be inflicted upon Lebanon. Then Hezbollah is going to be saddled with the bill, and a bunch of angry Lebanese who are going to say, why the heck did you drag us into this? Yes, we hate Israel. Yes, Palestine should be liberated from the river to the sea. Yes, the Jews should all be killed, whatever. But why did you drag us into this? This isn't our business. And now Hezbollah is not going to have the $10,000 that they did in 2006 to grant to people and say, here, rebuild your home at least. Shut up and rebuild your home. So that's the one hand. On the other hand, Hezbollah has to fulfill its duties to the resistance axis, or otherwise look like it's all bark and no bites. And these two things exist in tension. And each time the Israelis pull a move like this, each time they kill a senior Radwan commander, each time they assassinate Fuad Shukr, I guess that's only happened once, but whoever his successor may be, right? When they pull off something like this, it increases the tension between these two opposing goals. And then Hezbollah has to carefully thread its response between, which is a tripartite balancing act. On the one hand, it has to look like it is strong enough, the response is strong enough to its base, to demonstrate to its base, hey, we are still the strong and capable resistance. We are still able to deter and defeat the Israelis. We're not on our back foot. Because if it doesn't, it risks compromising the utility that it offers its base. Right, most of its supporters are supporting it for some kind of utilitarian reason, not for ideological reasons. That's the one angle. The second angle is that the attack has to actually be hard enough to reset the red lines with the Israelis. But then those two things interplay with the third, which is that it also has to not cross that threshold of sufficient provocation. Right, so each time Hezbollah has to respond, it has to juggle these three things all at the same time. And when you do something this big, that juggling act becomes so much harder to balance. And you may each time you risk a mistake, and you risk giving the Israelis the excuse they're looking for. Now, I don't think Hezbollah is going to take this too far. Nasrallah is supposed to speak tomorrow. I don't think
you better watch out. That get someone to check that speaker.
Exactly. Hey, did you recommend the microphone to him?
I got a recommendation. There's this company in Taiwan that I recommend to use. Tell him to give me a call. And I got a phone he should use too.
page him first.
Right.
But I mean, I don't think that if he's going to speak, I think he's going to try to do damage control, frame this, and look. At the end of the day, they've lost 20 guys, right? Give or take 20, 21 guys in this attack. Are they going to go to war? As spectacular as this was, there is the humiliation element of it, right? There is the injury element of it. But 20 guys have been killed. You're going to launch a war that's going to set Lebanon back into, forget the Stone Age, right? Over 20 guys who started a fight. Right now, in the course of this conflict, the war of attrition, it somehow has receded from memory in Lebanese public consciousness that Hezbollah started this on October 8th, right? There would have been nothing going on between Israel and Lebanon had Hezbollah not started attacking. If a war erupts, if the destruction that we're talking about is inflicted upon Lebanon, if there is no recovery aid, is that going to jog people's memory about who started this? And is Hezbollah going to have to deal with the consequences again of why did you start this war for a cause that, yes, we care about, but we don't care enough about to die for? Because if we're being honest, the Lebanese aren't even willing to die for their own country, let alone for a savior cause as far away as Palestine.
Two quick thoughts here, and you touched on this, David. How can Hezbollah respond to this in kind? And the answer is it really can't. This is such an attack of a magnitude, that it's not just that only 20 died or whatever that number is, how many it wounded, how far reaching, how the distrust that is put in there. They can't respond in a manner short that will trigger a full scale war and the destruction of Lebanon and likely the destruction or the weakening of Hezbollah. And the other thing is, I think it's ironic that Hezbollah has refrained from going balls deep into a war with Israel. And now literally some of these guys can't ever go balls deep into anything ever again. So, yeah.
But I think another thing we need to touch on is there's no solution to the Hezbollah problem, right? There is no solution short of military action. People will tell you diplomacy. Fine. I understand the logic that says we've been fighting the war on terrorism for decades, and where are we, right? Have we destroyed the ideology that fuels terrorism? Are we better off today? I mean, I think Al-Qaeda's capabilities have been eroded considerably. But yes, you can't destroy an ideology. But at the same time, it's not like you can negotiate your way out of this. It's not like when it comes to Hezbollah, that is premised on the idea that there is a credible Lebanese actor with whom you could cooperate and who could then act against Hezbollah in some manner to disarm the group, to draw away public support from the group, and whatever since we're calling out people here and we're calling out, you have the charlatans in DC telling you that there are such things as a Shia opposition, that there's a credible opposition in Lebanon, that if you would only empower them, would help you to counter Hezbollah. The Lebanese state, they're not even talking about the Lebanese state now. Now it's civil society and this imaginary opposition within the Shia community and whatever 15 people these people have in their WhatsApp groups that they keep referencing. But even they will tell you time and again, and I've heard this even recently, that, why won't Hezbollah just start firing rockets into Israeli cities, even chemical weapons, so we can get this job done? They want Israeli boys to go die to finish the job that is theirs to finish, that is the Lebanese to finish. They don't want to take care of their own problem. Even some who are willing to see Israel engage in a destructive war against their country, but are not willing to go to their cousins sometimes, and literally in some cases, and say, hey, enough of this, stop it. Right? Let's push back on this in our own environment. The excuse is they can't do it because they're so helpless. But there is no alternative. There is no Lebanese option. And, we need to be clear-eyed about that and not be led into, different illusory solutions that have been offered by the likes of Bashir Gemayel, or we talked about Rafiq Hariri. And now we have the concept of the Shia opposition. There is one solution to Hezbollah, unfortunately. It's not a solution that I think any of us really want here. But, in the absence of a peaceful solution, in the absence of the Lebanese willing to take that action that is really incumbent upon them themselves, what is there? Especially when, what they offer us are mirages like Shia opposition in civil society and, independent MPs and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's I think you mentioned this on the last podcast we did together, David. Those looking for the opposition in Lebanon, I highly recommend them investigate Ahmed Chalabi in Iraq. Led us down that primrose path.
And was eulogized by Hezbollah when he died, by the way.
Right.
I like to emphasize this. Was eulogized as an Iraqi nationalist by Hezbollah's representative in Iraq, Hamad Kautarani, when he died. We need to understand who it is we're dealing with, and the fact that we have interested individuals who are trying to solve their tribalistic concerns on the blood and backs of other people when they themselves are not willing to, take a break out of manicuring their hands to sully them enough to fight their own fight against Hezbollah. That is their fight against Hezbollah.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, any parting thoughts before we close out today?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I don't want to put a damper on things, but, I think when the Mossad, and we're assuming it's the Mossad here, came up with this plan, right? Of course, there are unintended consequences, right, to this type of action. And I think maybe not that this unintended consequence. One of the unintended consequences, the injury to this Iranian to the Iranian ambassador, right, to Lebanon. And so my thing is, obviously, we talked about Iran can respond to it. But what I'm worried here is that this opens up Israel, especially current Israeli politicians, Israeli ambassadors to other countries. It opens them up to Iranian attacks, and maybe Iran has tried already. I can't recall right now. But Iran considers that, well, you attack one of our politicians, right, or one of our ambassadors. Well, now we're going to attack one of yours, right? And this is talking about Israel. So that I'm thinking about that, right? Like that's a possibility here, because usually what we've seen in the past, it's nuclear scientists, right? Israel attack nuclear scientists, and obviously fighters in the field and military, and the obviously IRGC officers and such, and so on, and Iran's proxies. So I don't know. I mean, I'm just curious to see what comes out of all this, right? Obviously, I'm just concerned, right? I'm concerned Iran's going to try something big against Israel in response here. And then obviously Hezbollah. But I don't think it will be a knee-jerk reaction, okay, by either party. I don't think Hezbollah's just going to start firing a bunch of rockets tomorrow. Maybe they will, but I think they'll think about it, figure it out, and respond. So we'll see. But I'm sure we're going to be talking a lot more about this in the coming days and weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, David, thanks so much for joining on such short notice and for being good sports in a little different episode that we did here today.
Always a pleasure, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Yep. Catch you both soon. And thanks everyone for listening. Thanks everyone for listening to today's episode of Generation Jihad. Just a reminder, you can listen to us on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Please subscribe to Generation Jihad and leave us a review, preferably a positive one, but only if we earned it. Thanks again, and we'll see you all again real soon.